And also that will happen.
Yeah, and I'll get the link later from my own website if we could.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Welcome, everyone. I see all your little participant numbers coming into the chat. I'm imagining you all walking into a room. I'm not a writer, but I have powers of observation. So you're all wearing excellent clothes, or you look very comfortable. You're like settling in for the next hour. Excited for this conversation. Well, not really conversation, presentation, and then Q&As from you all. So come on in. You're welcome to use the chat to talk about what you're reading, maybe your favorite book by Jeffery Deaver. We could do all sorts of things tonight in the chat. Remember to take a look at where that Q&A box is. That's where you'll want to put your questions this evening. If you put them in the chat, I'll probably find them also, but try to put them in the Q&A box. And yes, greetings. I see the chat starting to pop up. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. A reminder also that you can turn on captions for this conversation. I keep calling it a conversation because I came from a book launch and it was a great conversation. It's just very much in my mind. So, but presentation is really what I want to be saying. And yeah, we'll get going in just a minute. Excellent. All of you have water, your coffee, your tea, any other drink you might have in hand. And I think we're, good to start going. I love how everyone shares where they are. You just imagine all these little dots on a map around the country participating this evening. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Freeman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to MWA University. MWA-U 2024 includes 6 online classes taught by top-notch crime writers, and we have reached session 5 with Jeffery Deaver. A reminder that these classes are free to current MWA members, so if you're not a member yet, consider this an excellent reason to join. And now I'm going to introduce Jeff. Jeffery Deaver is an international #1 best-selling author. His books are sold in 150 countries. Jeff, I wonder if you could list all of them for us later. 150 countries. Oh, wait,
No,
maybe not. You
no, I
probably
can't. That's
can.
all right. So,
Well, next time you're asked that in an introduction and translated into 25 languages. He has served 2 terms as president of Mystery Writers of America and was recently named a Grand Master of MWA, whose ranks include Agatha Christie, Ellery Queen, Mary Higgins Clark, and Walter Mosley. The author of 48 novels, 100 short stories, and a nonfiction law book, and a lyricist of a country western album, the link to which I'm going to put in the chat. He's received or been shortlisted for scores of awards from around the world. In addition to being named a Grand Master, he has been honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Bouchercon World Mystery Convention, the Strand Magazine's Lifetime Achievement Award, and the Raymond Chandler Lifetime Achievement Award in Italy. His book, A Maiden's Grave, was made into an HBO movie starring James Garner and Marlee Matlin titled Dead Silence. His novel, The Bone Collector, was a feature release from Universal Pictures starring Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie. Lifetime aired an adaptation of his The Devil's Teardrop. NBC Television recently aired the 9-episode primetime series Lincoln Rhyme, Hunt for the Bone Collector, and the new CBS show Tracker, which is the streaming is premiering very soon, and I'm very excited because I loved the first season, is based on his novel The Never Game, featuring his character Colton Shaw. Deaver was born in Glen Ellis, Illinois, fellow Midwesterner, and has a Bachelor of Journalism from the University of Missouri and a law degree from Fordham University. With all of that said, he is the perfect presenter for tonight's topic, writing a commercial thriller. He'll be sharing how to create fast-paced plots, pitfalls to avoid, and much more. Reminder to share your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we'll turn to those in a bit. And Jeff, we're so thrilled to have you. Please take it away.
well, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, everybody in attendance and to MWA as well. Yes, welcome to my course in writing commercial fiction with the emphasis this evening on plotting. Now, Somerset Maugham, the great British writer, said there are 3 simple rules for writing a great novel. Sadly, no one knows what they are. Well, I don't quite agree with that great writer. I feel that given a desire to write and a fair command of the language of your choice, you can both publish a novel and improve a novel with a bit of guidance, with a bit of help from people who've been there before. And as you heard, I can't attest to the quality of what I've done, but I've sure done a lot of it. So I hope you find my comments tonight helpful. There are three elements in fiction: plot, character, and setting. Of these, the first is far and away the most important. And while important in all fiction, plotting is especially important in commercial fiction and crime writing in particular, where the point is to entertain and put your readers in a roller coaster and drag them kicking and screaming from the beginning to the end as quickly as possible. But then there are plots, and there are plots. Here's a plot. Chapter 1. He woke up from his nap. He looked at the wall. The paint had dried. The end. Well, that's what I would call a liver-flavored plot. We don't want that. We want a mint-flavored plot. What am I talking about here? Well, let me explain. Imagine that I had decided to give up writing. Here's where I expect you all to groan and moan and shake your heads. No, don't worry, it's merely a hypothetical. And I'm going to become a product designer for Procter & Gamble. And I go to my boss and I say, Joe, I had dinner with my partner last night, and she and I had something called pate. Have you ever heard of pate? And he said, yeah, it's overpriced liverwurst. And I say, that's it exactly. Well, here's my idea. We are going to make liver-flavored toothpaste because it's something nobody's ever done before. It's going to put us on the map, and we'll get press for it. It'll sell off the shelves. Well, that's when Joe asks me two questions. He says, Jeff, question one, is this a product for cats and dogs? Because animals need good dental hygiene too. And I say, no, it's for people. And he asks the second question, which is, Jeff, is your resume in order because you're fired? Why? Because people do not want liver-flavored toothpaste, nor do they want liver-flavored plots. And so my presentation tonight will be actually running this metaphor completely into the ground by teaching you what I hope will be the key to creating liver-flavored plots. Well, what is a mint-flavored plot now that I've set that up? Well, a mint-flavored plot is one that will help you achieve your mission and your only mission in writing fiction. And what's that mission? To create the most emotionally engaging story that you can possibly write. Well, that begs the question, what is the most emotionally engaging story you can possibly write? And it's this, and I'm going to recite it twice, and I'd like you to write it down. And if I skip through it kind of quickly, I know we don't have a lot of time tonight, but you can email me through my website, and I'll make sure you get these words. Your mission, emotionally engaging story. What is that? It's this. It's a story, a work of fiction, in which living, breathing characters, good and bad, pursue high-stakes goals, ideally over a short period of time, and in the process, constantly confront increasingly difficult questions and conflicts they must resolve, which questions and conflicts ultimately are resolved in a way satisfying to readers. I'm going to say that again. What's your job? Create an emotionally engaging story. What is an emotionally engaging story? It's one in which living, breathing characters, both good and bad, pursue high-stakes goals, ideally over a short period of time, and in the process, constantly confront increasingly difficult questions and conflicts that they must resolve, which questions and conflicts ultimately are resolved in a way that is satisfying to readers. So given that goal, how do we construct our mint-flavored plots that will allow us to achieve that? I'm going to run through about 8 or 9 rules that I have adopted in my own writing. And you may say, well, I don't like those. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing more subjective than writing. Or you may say, I already know what that is, and go get yourself a beer, which is absolutely fine as well. Don't imagine my telling you what to do. Imagine this is a Jeff nowadays talking to a Jeff 45. Oh my God, did I really say that? Years ago when I started writing, and these tricks of the trade might have come in handy then. Okay, rule 1, getting to craft our mint flavored plots. Rule 1, plan the plot ahead of time. And yes, I know, I hear the groans already. I'm talking about outlining. I'm a firm outliner. I definitely believe in it. Joyce Carol Oates said, you cannot write your last sentence until you know what the first sentence is. And that's absolutely true. You've probably heard the phrase, a plotter as opposed to a pantser, as in seat of the pants. Outlining is like the unpleasant relative, the black sheep of the family. I disagree. I think writing has 2 functions. One is left brain and one is right brain. The left brain, of course, is the more analytical. The right brain is the, let's call it the fancier, the more creative. You can look at it this way. The outline is the strut and the beams of an aircraft, and the prose is the skin. You need them both to make it soar. And I feel that if you don't have the outline in shape, you're in for a lot of trouble. Again, just Jeff talking to Jeff, you may disagree, but that's what I do firmly believe. What do I do for an outline? I spend 8 months for each book and probably a month for my short stories outlining the entire structure. I'm excessive. You don't need to do that. My outlines end up being about 140 to 150 pages. That's ridiculous. Now, in fairness, they include little snippets of dialogue, little bits of research too, but you simply need to know where you're going. And if your outline is 10 pages long, fantastic. That's all you're going to need. Now, why outline? And I do want to harp on this for a minute because I do feel it's important. First of all, novels have to have a structure in the same way that a musical score has to have a structure. That's the way they work. Look at a symphony. There are various movements in a symphony, just as we have various scenes in our books. A symphony, vivace, andante, the fast-moving ones, adagio, at the end there's a crescendo. At the very end, there's a coda, kind of a soft reconciliation of the themes. Without spacing those out, without putting them in the proper position to achieve that emotional response, you're kind of wasting the entire time you're listening to a symphony or you're reading a book. It's possible to come up with a structure on the fly, and many writers do it, and they do a wonderful job. They don't need to outline, but it's just harder. Let's say you come up with an idea and you sit down and start to write. You're a pantser, you come up with a beautiful idea, and then you realize, well, it's not quite working. And then you go back and you have to like readjust the structure, and that may involve throwing out a huge amount of work. It can be done. It's just a lot more trouble than if you outline it in the first place. Well, what's the second reason for outlining? When I do my presentations in person, I always ask the question to the audience, have you ever read a book that should not have been written? And everyone in the audience looks at each other, and then as soon as I raise my hand, they raise their hands, because we've all read books that should not have been written. Now, how does that happen? Well, here's one way that it often happens. You come up with a brilliant set piece idea, set piece, very exciting scene. I hold up as the example, the beginning of Deadpool, the wonderful Marvel, I don't know if it's Marvel or not, a superhero story that all kinds of stuff is happening at once. That's a set piece. And you think this is great, and it probably is great. And you sit down and you start to write. And the first chapter goes like lightning, and the second chapter goes like lightning, and the third chapter slows down a little bit, and the fourth chapter slows down even more, and you can see where this is going. By chapter 6, you've written 200 pages of prose that is at a dead end. You don't know where you're going to go with that. And you think, well, maybe I'll put in a kind of a middle that's full of cliches, and I'll put in an ending that doesn't quite work, but it's kind of functional. Well, that's not a mint flavored book. And you were confronted with two options, given that you have just written half or most of a book that should not have been written. Option one is you're going to get my take on it right now, the morally courageous, upright, intellectually honest thing, and throw the whole damn thing out, every single word. Because if you can write a good set piece beginning for a bad book, think of the great set piece beginning you can write for a good book. Or you can do the morally dishonest, the cowardly, the reprehensible thing. Are you getting my take on it? And fill in those cliches in the middle and a deus ex machina ending, deus ex machina ending when the villain comes out of left field. We never saw the villain before. Deus ex machina, by the way, is Greek for I don't know how to end this friggin' book. And then put that out in the stream of commerce. And you have just given your fans a piece of liver-flavored fiction, and that's not acceptable because fans are gods. Nobody is more important than our fans. But if you had outlined and you came up with that set piece and you put the post-it note of great kick-ass beginning up in the, I'm a little dyslexic, that'd be the upper left-hand corner, and then started to fill in and realized that by 10 days, 2 weeks, there's no book there. You throw out those post-it notes and start over again. That's all you've wasted. A third reason to outline, and I could go on and on, but I'm going to just limit it to this, and that is that writer's block occurs in plotting. It does not occur in the creation of a character. It does not occur in setting, and it occurs simply kind of what I described a moment ago. You don't know where the story is going to go. Well, if you're crafting that prose and you have this juggernaut of 200 pages of prose and well-written prose that you've created, how do you turn the story to go this way or that way when the story now is dictating where you're going to go? You run into that brick wall and you're blocked. Well, if you outline, you may run into that brick wall with post-it note number 42 or number 7 or whatever, and you say, have no idea where this is going to go. You say, hell with it. You take another post-it note and jump ahead, I don't know, 2 rows down, 1 row down, maybe 3 scenes hence, and you fill that in, and suddenly that informs the block, and you may say, I've got a solution. And then you take that post-it note out, you rewrite a new one, or you throw it out completely. You didn't need that scene to start with. So, firm believer in outlining to enhance plotting. Now, rule 2, mint plotting requires continual and repeated conflicts. You remember our definition from a moment ago. Continual and repeated conflicts. You need high stakes conflicts at the core of the story. And I mean something vitally important to your characters. Not necessarily big crimes, hacking into the world's banking system, nuclear holocaust, asteroids plummeting toward Earth, presidential elections. Promised I wasn't going to do that, but I couldn't stop myself. All of those might be platforms for a thriller, but unless we see the implications up close and personal, they don't really mean anything to us. It's like Michael Bay meets Marvel, fun, exciting, explosions, but do they grab your heart? Usually not. High stakes could mean something as simple as someone keeping a beloved job, as freedom, a physical condition, staying alive, of course, a relationship, a way of life. It could also mean a desire to take a life or to stay out of prison if you're in the point of view of the bad guy or the bad gal. You think of the great book Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth, not the movie. Well, the first movie was good. The second movie was awful. But the story was about an assassin trying to kill de Gaulle, Charles de Gaulle. Made all the more exciting because we know he doesn't succeed. But very cataclysmic geopolitical consequences if he does succeed. We don't focus on that. We are continually in the closed, sweaty space of each of those heroes and anti-heroes. And the story was one of the most compelling things you will ever read. And remember, conflicts have to occur throughout the book. from escaping in a sinking car while you're trying to disarm a bomb at the same time before you go over the dam, to something very routine. And let me give you an example. Here's one way to describe an incident from a novel, one of my Lincoln Rhyme books. I created this from whole cloth. This is not in a book. Amelia Sachs, who is my forensic investigator, walked into the crime scene, nodded to the technicians and police brass who stood nearby, and dressed in the Tyvek overalls. The body had been processed, the witnesses interviewed, and now it was time to let the evidence speak the truth of what had happened. Well, it's functional. But frankly, what's the excitement? None. Here's telling the same story a slightly different way, paying attention to the conflict in a plot. This one was going to be a problem. Amelia Sachs stood at the edge of the crime scene near the fluttering yellow police tape. Her palms sweated in the latex glove. Her scalp itched beneath the bonnet. She paused and looked down the narrow shaft where the murder victim lay, 20 feet below ground, accessible only through a 2-foot wide pipe, a pipe she needed to crawl through, and soon, before the evidence dissipated, while she controlled what was her greatest fear on earth, claustrophobia. All right, same incident, same facts, except now our palms are sweating. Now the plot is racing forward. Now we're going to jump to rule 3, and I'm going to give you the most important rule probably you've ever heard on the subject of creating conflicts in plotting. Are you ready? And I'd like you to write this one down too. I'm going to give you a second to get your pens and papers or those tablet things and computers ready. You all set? Rule number 3. Ready? That's right. Rule 3 is that after an appropriate period of time, you resolve every single question you have raised. We need to know what happens to every main character who is introduced in the book, what happens to every springboard, every high note we end a chapter on that has to be resolved. We need to know, for heaven's sakes, how the book ends. Don't give me any of this French Connection nonsense. French Connection, William Friedkin, great director, a great movie, Popeye Doyle, up until the point where it ends. And does it end? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Not really acceptable. But you do need to resolve everything in a fair manner. Again, we don't want any of those Deus Ex Machinas. Now, so what are we talking about? Rule 3, resolve every conflict you raise. Make sure that you think long and hard about the important resolutions in the book. And remember, you don't need to make it a happy ending. If anyone out there has ever seen Breaking Bad, which I consider maybe one of the best things ever done on television, no spoilers here, but could you call that a happy ending? Well, not exactly, but was it a satisfying ending? Yes, absolutely. That and the allied Better Call Saul, another ending, happy? Well, that's up for you to decide. However, it was a truly satisfying ending. Okay, rule 4, again, we're talking about subplots. I simply keep an eye on the time and may go a touch longer than we planned because I'm a bit long-winded, but we want to cover as many topics as we can here. Rule 4 in creating our mint-flavored plots, use subplots. In almost all of my books, I have the core crime. Will the terrorist or serial killer be stopped? But I also have subplots, sometimes related and sometimes not. Usually there's a personal subplot. For instance, Lincoln Rhyme, who's disabled, will he have successful surgery to improve his condition? It has nothing to do with him tracking down the terrorist. Coulter Shaw from the Tracker CBS TV show, if you're familiar with that, or from the Never Game or the other Coulter Shaw books, unraveling the mystery of what happened to his father's, what his father's death was caused by. Will that have anything to do with the main plot? In 1 or 2 books it does, but basically it doesn't. We still want to know the answer to that question. And then that's plot number 2, the main core crime plot, the personal, what I call the soap opera plot, and then the geopolitical plot, because I want my books to remain with you a little bit after you have finished them. Take a book like The Broken Window, about the dangers of data mining. And I will say I was there about 12 years before the birth of AI and ChatGPT and large language models and so forth. I wanted people to think about that. My book, The Kill Room, was about targeted extrajudicial assassinations by the U.S. government. Something to think about. Geopolitical plots. It just is an opportunity to increase the tension, make the story move more quickly, make readers turn pages, which brings us to rule 5, a very simple rule: be manipulative. Good plotting requires you to play with the reader's minds. Nothing wrong with it. We want to be manipulated. Did you ever go to a horror film and think, oh, I accidentally wandered into a Nicholas Sparks novel? No. You want to see the slashers. You want to see the detectives race to save the victim, of course, it's always the blonde co-ed that seems to go first. That seems a little unfair, but still, the story is racing along, and we want the readers to lose sleep. I had a friend, still have the friend, but this was a phone call I got from him some years ago, and he said, Jeff, thanks for coming to the wedding. He just gotten married. And I had given them, in addition to the, I don't know, some kind of cliched crystal, copy of my latest book. And he said, but Jeff, I do want you to know one thing. My wedding night, after the party, we went back to the hotel room, my bride and myself, and she said, just give me a few minutes. I've got to finish this chapter of Jeff's. He woke up at 6 in the morning and she was just finishing the book then. In fairness, they'd been living together for 10 years, so this was not a, quote, wedding night, but I was so pleased to hear that story. Why? Because I had manipulated her into reading the book. That's a good thing. We want to be manipulated. I try for one sitting reads, if possible, and you should too. Okay, rule 6, use plot reversals. What's a plot reversal? These are the events in the interior of a book that are surprises that change the direction of the story in an unexpected and radical way, usually at the end of a chapter. They're not the big surprise ending of the book. These are big, knock you over the head shocks when you realize in chapter 3 that the detective, who's been our hero's best buddy, turns out to be working for the villain, or vice versa. We learn that the villain, who is about to assassinate our hero, is actually working for an allied law enforcement agency and saves his or her life. These are pretty easy to come up with. When you write your book and you outline, as I've basically bludgeoned you into doing, what I do at the end of every outline section, which is a chapter, I write springboard ? There has to be something there that launches you into the next, either the next chapter, or, as we'll see in a minute, 2 chapters hence. And I have to say, after all my years of doing this, I largely did this somewhat instinctively, but never formalized it as I did until I wrote a book with a co-author. The first thing I've done, Isabella Maldonado, who wrote with me, we co-authored a book, Fatal Intrusion, that's just come out. And she and I did the outline together and wrote the prose together. And she gave me that trick of writing springboard at the end of every chapter. And I strongly recommend it. Okay, now, rule number 7, mint flavored plotting, it's difficult to say, excuse me. Mint flavored plotting requires surprise endings. I'm sorry, you got to have them. Nothing is more important than this. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think we're talking literary fiction, romance novels, fantasy. They all have to have surprises. We love surprises. We love the unexpected. And I say surprise endings, plural, because every one of my subplots has its own discrete surprise ending. And then the core plot, remember, we've got the main story, catch the terrorist, stop the serial killer. Each of the main plots has to have multiple surprise endings. So we get down to the 40 pages left at the end of the book, and oh my God, we found the killer. Only 2 pages hence, no, we haven't found the killer. It's somebody else. That turns the story in a different direction. And then ideally, if I can pull it off, yet another surprise ending. Actually, in the book, Isabella and I just finished this fatal intrusion. I had an idea for yet again another plot after the 3 twists, another surprise ending after the 3 that we had put in. And she and I talked about it, and we decided it was kind of like, Freddy Krueger coming to life at the end of whatever he was in, Halloween or Friday the 13th, like the 3rd time. And we thought that was a twist too far, I think we decided. But have a couple surprise endings. One reason for that being that you guys, well, my audience, I understand, is mostly writers, but your readers as well. But you as readers and readers in general are really damn smart, and they can figure out plot twists. I want to make sure I give them at least one surprise if I can. Now, the trick when it comes to surprise endings is you have to play fair. The twist at the end must come out of clues that you have seeded into the story. But like an illusionist, you have to present the clue, but draw readers' attention away from it. And I'm going to tell you a couple of the tricks I use to do that. One way is to focus on the clue directly early in the book, but give it a second harmless meaning. And I'll give you an example of that. And there's an apparent killer who is tracking down our hero, and his intent is to kill her. And the story goes along, and clearly this is a very nefarious, nasty person who's got a silencer on his gun, and he's tracking down our hero and taking pictures and plotting her route. And then just as he moves in, say 7/8 of the way through the story, another bad guy pops up, and this apparent villain, bang, shoots the bad guy, saving our hero's life. And it turns out that the person we thought was the bad guy is actually working for the CIA or another agency or something like that. What a surprise. Love that. Now the apparent bad guy, now the good guy, is working with our hero. And what happens at the very last scene? No, the bad person really is a bad person and pulls out the gun to kill our hero, our heroine. But she, of course, is one of my creations. So she's figured it out and she shoots him first. But you see how that kind of allayed everybody's suspicion. Now, the second way to create a working clue, a working twist, is to mention the clue very glancingly so that, yeah, you brought it up fairly, but it's kind of hidden from the reader's intention. And let's turn to Lincoln Rhyme again. And so Lincoln Rhyme, early in the book, finds trace evidence at a crime scene. He learns it's a type of oil that's resistant to extreme temperatures. He makes the assumption that this means heat, and he has officers look for a killer in a foundry, with the big tanks of molten lead and things like that. Well, in fact, the phrase extreme temperatures can also be something extremely cold. And it turns out that the clue referred to the killer hiding away in the wheel compartment of an airplane where the temperatures are 60 or 70 degrees below zero. We play fair, and so when the reader sees that, I should have thought of that. Now, finally, another thing about surprise endings, very important. You must acknowledge your reader's participation in the game. By that, I mean, in the example I just gave, about Lincoln and the the oil that's impervious to extreme temperatures. At the end, readers, you fooled them. But Lincoln Rhyme also has to say, you know what? Damn, I was fooled by that. I thought it was something hot. And, now we think, okay, Lincoln is no smarter than I am as a reader. He got fooled, I got fooled, and we all had a good time. Okay, rule 8. Mint plotting requires threatening the readers, not just your characters. They need a stake in the story. We don't want readers to be academically interested in our novels. We want them to have skin in the game. And how does this happen? Well, I cheated a little bit earlier when I minimized the importance of character. I'm not going to talk about setting at all because I really don't care much about setting, but character, yes, character is important. The best plots in the world are not helpful if you don't have a great character. And so you have to spend a lot of time working on them. In fact, you have to spend so much time working on them that they become our readers' acquaintances, and even better than that, their friends. So that when you imperil that character, readers are going to be on the edge of their seats thinking, no, don't kill them, don't hurt them. And the peril has to come from it has to come in several different forms. Now, for one thing, you're not going to kill your main character off. Just don't do it. It's crazy. You never know when this, you're going to get a letter from the publisher that says, we love your main character, shame you killed them off. Work on that. There's no way to work on it. Don't kill your main character off, and don't hit them over the head and injure them. Who cares? If it's not your head that's being hit, it's their head. They're going to recover. Readers know that. That doesn't matter. But how can you imperil them? You can imperil them by threatening what they love, maybe their loved ones, threaten their job, their beloved job, threaten to take Lincoln Rhymes' consulting practice away from him, take away potential relatives. So these psychic harms, or I call them soap opera harms, are as much of a risk to the main characters as any physical harm you could ever give them. Now, doesn't mean you can't kill people off, because these are thrillers, right? And what's the fun of not killing anybody in our books? But the people you imperil are the secondary characters. And yes, I know some of you right now of my age are thinking, the fifth crewman on the Enterprise, referring to the original Star Trek, when the main characters beamed down to the planet, and that would be, Scotty, Spock, and Kirk. And then there was always the fifth crewman, the guy who was in the different colored jersey, and he was not on last week's show, and he will not be on next week's show because the Klingon alien is going to turn him to vapor with a phaser. And that did happen quite a bit. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. However, the thing is, this is not episodic TV. This is a novel, and you have to spend a lot of time crafting those characters so that the readers do care about them, and they are on the edge of the seat when you imperil them. Okay, rule 9, don't anticipate or tip your hand in plotting. Maintain suspense. I'll give you an example of that. If you wrote this, let's take a book set in, and if you can hear my dogs right now, they're complaining because they're actually my other co-authors, and if they're not in my lap when I'm at my computer, they're a bit cross. I think they have kibble block at the moment. So rule 9, don't anticipate or tip your hand. Here's an example from New York City. He jumped into his car and sped onto the FDR at 42nd Street, never knowing he would never make it downtown alive. Well, why on earth should we keep reading? We know he's dead, but what's the point? Consider this passage instead. He jumped into his car on 42nd Street, sped onto the FDR, nudged the accelerator down, and hit 80 miles an hour, aware suddenly of a curious vibration in the steering column, something he'd never felt before. Bang, cut that chapter, jump to a subplot chapter. Now we're gonna move forward to find out what happened to him. And also, how the hell he's doing 80 miles an hour on the FDR, where the fastest I've ever been on that is 45, and that's on a pretty clear day. Okay, well, what we're going to do now is jump to the last rule about plotting. I make it rule number 10, and this has to do with your own personal plotting. What do I mean by that? It's about how you plot outside the book to make yourself into a published and a successful published author. It's our goal, right? We all have that goal. And the answer to that is simple. Take your time. Take your time in all aspects of this business. Be patient. Everyone out there has the skill to become a best-selling author. We know you all have the drive to do that because you're sitting listening to me when you could be doing 1,000 other things. But the plots that people craft to create that reality for themselves run into stumbling blocks, if you will, largely because of impatience. They write the book too quickly. They tend not to rewrite and listen to Ernest Hemingway's wonderful advice that you're not a great, don't aspire to be a great writer, aspire to be a great rewriter. I rewrite 30, 40, 50 times. I rewrite on the computer, I rewrite on the printed page because we experience the story differently on paper. And finally, I listen to the book word for word. The word processing program I use, Word, has a listen aloud program. Use it. Absolutely use it. You can also use a standalone program called Natural Soft, and I'm sure there are others. Follow along word for word, and you will be amazed at the things you see that are outright mistakes, and also tonal errors and things about the book that you would like to change that you just missed the first 3 or 4 or 10 rewrites going through. So take your time. Now that's crafting the book itself. When you finally have a book that you are comfortable with, take your time getting it to market. Don't settle for a publishing solution that is not what you really want. I have nothing against self-publishing. William Shakespeare was self-published. There have been wonderful books and plays and poetry that's been self-published. But if in your heart you want to be traditionally published, then hold out for that. And if you've crafted a product that you're confident with, other people will be confident with it as well. Take your time. This is not a roller coaster. The book should be a roller coaster. Getting published should not be. And if you do take your time, you'll have a quality product, and you will have a publisher that will be eager to get your story into the hands of readers who will look forward to every day brushing their teeth with your fine book. Well, now I guess it's time to look at a few questions, if we could. And I'm going to, Katie, are you going to jump in verbally for those?
I am going to jump in verbally,
Okay.
if that's all right. I won't be answering any of them. I'll just be asking them to you. But first, I just wanted to say thank you. This is fantastic. And we'll be sharing, we'll be sharing a handout with all those rules. I know some of us were trying to write them down very quickly. So we'll be sharing a handout afterwards with a link to the video.
If I may
please,
make a comment.
Yeah.
I just see a few comments there, and I say hi to North Carolina and some friends there. And I also have to say hi to Chris K, because the UN has 195 countries, still some exciting places to go. And after we hang up, I'm calling my agent because somebody's a slacker here and it isn't me.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we didn't have you name all of them, because now you can discover which ones are still to be.
Azerbaijan. Okay, go ahead.
You'll get to all of them soon. And we will get to, I think, probably all of your questions. Let's see how many we get through. But I just wanted to say, I just wanted to bring up the what you started with, that we want a mint flavored plot, not a liver plot, and that your mission, all of you writers, is to create the most emotionally engaging story you can possibly write. And I would just like to say personally, as a reader, I'm very glad to hear you say that fans are gods. So feeling very godlike also in my ability to choose the questions, what order we go in right now. So
Send the lightning bolts my way, Katie. I'm ready to
yes.
do so.
I also giving I'm in the home of an author friend of mine whose book is up here, and it's
Uh,
called The Red Shirt. So
ah,
talking about enterprise and talking about red shirts, it's very, very different. It involves football, this book.
I've heard
Anyway,
about it.
we're gonna do a couple of like quick questions, or possibly quick questions, and then get into some additional ones as well. We had a couple of questions about, do you have a word count for each book? Do you have a target of how long a book should be?
Yes, and I'll answer this. I could go on and on because, and as you may know, and I hope you will look for when I give my course, this was a very, very brief chunk of about a 5-hour course I have in all aspects of commercial writing, and over the past few years, it's come to my attention, like everyone else's, that this is a Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu streaming world, and we vie for the time uh, for a creative experience with those other platforms. And I've adjusted my books to try to make mine more streaming. And so the word count has shrunk. I'm now about 100,000 words rather than 130,000 words. My chapters are shorter. The book Isabella and I have out now, Fatal Intrusion, has about 82 chapters in it. The paragraphs are shorter. There's more dialogue. The books are still I think thoughtful. There are still moving passages. I mean, we write her books, my books, our standalone books, and the joint book. We write with a lot of emotion and heart in it, and yet they just move like lightning. So I keep things quite trim. I have been writing more short fiction. I write Amazon original stories, and those have become apparently quite popular. Just got a notice. I sold 200, I think 250 or 300,000 of a short story. And that suggests to me that there's a market out there for shorter storytelling. So that's what I will continue to do. And I published also with Amazon, I published novellas, about 100, I'm sorry, about 80, 60 to 80,000 words, but I'm not going much shorter than that. A true short story will be 20,000 words, but for a long piece fiction, 100,000 is what you really need.
Well, and speaking to that, this is Ruth's question was about how many pages should each chapter be? And when you're talking about 100,000 words and about 82 chapters, that's pretty
It's
short chapters.
yeah, the chapters are short. I can't really speak to, it's whatever word processing program puts on a page, 250 words a page or whatever. Page count, nowadays, page count is really irrelevant. I wouldn't worry about that. It's word count that's important.
This one too, I'm gonna just do some of these like possibly briefer ones, although I know, as you say, each question could contains a world. Do you have a minimum amount of subplots you aim for?
Three, three.
Oh,
I would
fantastic. That was the fastest answer I could have ever expected.
say no more. One's the main plot, one's the soap opera plot, and one is the broader, I call it geopolitical, but it could be philosophical plot as well, something like that.
And sorry, this one was about how long did you say that you spend plotting a novel again? Was it a month? Was it longer than that?
Well, when we say, if you mean by outlining, no, I'll spend 6 to 8 months outlining before I write a single word of the prose. But during that time, I also do the research. Now, research I did not have a chance to talk about, but people enjoy learning things. We like a lot of research. I don't do Dan Brown level research because I don't want the story to digress. Not that his books do digress, but sometimes there's kind of a big information dump, and we don't want to do that. So let's call it a round up to 7 months of plotting and doing research at the same time. And then when that's done, you write the book really fast. You know, you may wake up one morning and the sun's shining, the birds are singing, you look at your outline, I got to murder somebody today. I don't feel like that. I reserve that for like when the cable repair guy says he's going to come in the morning and doesn't show up for 2 days. That's when I want to kill somebody. And that's when I write those sections.
Well, if you lived in New York, you would be doing that every day. Waiting for the cable guy,
Serial killers.
cable person, yes. Or people going 80 on the FDR, which I definitely don't recommend to anyone. Ed had asked about, do you have an example of an outline for a short story? And I'm not quite sure in what way Ed means this question, but maybe we could expand it to think about what does your kind of your outlining process look for a short story
Sure.
versus a novel?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I'll start with the twist. And the problem I have with my short stories is, well, you know, I'm going to give one away here because it will be a perfect example. I had this idea, it goes back a long time. So if you read it, it may not even, I think it's in one of my collections, but here's the story, and I've given away the twist to start with. A 12-year-old girl um, um, wants to go to the prom, and her father won't let her. So she sets up his murder. I'm sorry, sets him up as a killer. So he goes to jail, and the night of the prom, he's gone on the slammer, and she puts the little corsage or whatever it's called, the little corsage on your wrist, and she goes off to the play. Well, okay, that idea came to me. Where did it come from? I don't know. I'm sick and twisted. So, how's that short story gonna go? Okay, I made her the subject of a stalker, and he was a stalker I called the kneeling soldier, and he would dress in fatigues and kneel outside her window every night, and then would follow her to school, and you know, he never hurt her, never, but just stared at her. And her father was extremely overly protective, and said, no, you're not going out, you're not going to meet your friends at the mall, you're not going to go to the prom. And finally, and she was very distraught about that. And so finally, she comes to her crying, and she says, Daddy, he broke into my room and he went through my, you know, my drawer, my clothes drawer. And then the next day, the young man was found bludgeoned to death with a golf club, and it was the father's golf club. And of course, you can see where this is going now. And you know, he was a hero in a way. He sacrificed himself to save his daughter. And of course, the final line in the short story was, "Oh, honey," as she's getting ready, dressed to go to the prom. The final line is, "Oh, honey, your golf instructor called and said, 'Do you need a lesson on Monday?' And she said, 'No, I've learned everything I need to know about golf. Thank you.'" And so, of course, you know, she was a little killer, and that was the idea, but then I had to work backwards from that. And so the outline was, I don't know, a page long. You know, the last line about the golf game, that was the last line. And then I had, you know, an incident of him stalking her. A little below that was the incident of she goes to dad, incident of the fight with her father. You know, probably 10 scenes. I juggled them, but that's how that worked.
I feel like listening to you talk about all these plots, I keep getting entered like very quickly into each story, finding out what's happening. So thank you. We've got 9 questions left and 6 minutes, so that
Okay, well,
doesn't really work out too
I'll go,
well.
I'll go very, this will be like lightning round.
Okay,
Okay.
well, let's do, what is your daily writing schedule?
I wake up about 5:30 a.m. And I work until about 8 p.m. at night. But I do a lot of other things in there. I have 2 dogs, which you maybe heard a little bit earlier. I walk them and feed them, and I do other things with the business side of writing, and that would include signing contracts, doing many interviews, teaching courses like this, and I'm working on several things at once. Oh, now you froze. Have I frozen by any chance? Oh, are we back?
Okay, well, that was just absolutely not the thriller that I needed for the end of this webinar. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm gonna just let my heartbeat close down for a second, or
Well,
maybe not close, but
it's called the internet. This stuff happens. And so,
that that was and okay, all right, everyone. Your
so
questions have very sadly disappeared. So
oh, well, you know what? I have a couple here, and I
we
have,
do, yes. I was going to say let's take this one, which actually I find fascinating as well. When you have so many different ideas, how do you decide to just choose one instead of going back and forth? How do you pick between all the ideas you have?
oh my gosh, that's maybe the hardest thing ever. I've been very lucky. I'm a very pedestrian writer. My style, if you know it, is very, I was a journalist, trained in journalism. So it's not a flowery, Cormac McCarthy style by any means, but I just tell I tell a solid story. I have so many stories to tell, I'll never get to them. So, which one do I pick? If it's a story that I think will be a Colter Shaw book, there goes, I'll write Colter Shaw. If it's forensics oriented, I'll write a Lincoln Rhyme. Isabella and I are now doing this series, Sanchez and Heron, about a woman agent who works for the Department of Homeland Security and kind of a nerdy computer guy who's what's known as an intrusionist, a term I made up. And he was a black hat hacker, and the bee in his bonnet is how society is trying to be taken over by government spying and corporate spying, and that's become very popular. This series. So we're working on a new book right now, and I see a comment that the what's up next. Of course, we have Fatal Intrusion now. My next book will be a Colter Shaw book, and then the next Sanchez and Heron book called The Grief Artist will be out next September. So I have a Lincoln Rhyme book in May, and then keep checking, shameless self-promotion, right? Keep checking my website for the Amazon original stories.
Well, speaking of checking your website, is that a place where people could find out about your next seminar?
Yes, yeah, far more about me than they'll ever want to know.
Excellent. It's a great website. I posted in the chat. You guys can find it very easily. And we'll go a couple minutes past the hour just because of our exciting frozen issues. We did actually have a question that's been posted about the Never Game, about the teaser opening. That the book starts with Colter trying to rescue a woman from a sinking boat. Then we go back to the beginning of the story. Yeah. So this is a question about like flash forward, like what does it look like to kind of start in the middle of something and then go back? I think this is a question like temporally that could relate to a lot of people.
It's a fractured timeline, a la Quentin Tarantino or Vince Gilligan from Breaking Bad, and it opens with it's the phrase, the old Roman phrase, joking about in media, joking about Deus Ex Machina, in media res, means the story opens in the middle. The first chapter is in the middle of the book, and then we it's not a flashback; it's a flash forward. And I just did that because I wanted to kind of tease the reader. Teaser, I think the one who Doug, I think that's, if I'm reading correctly, Douglas maybe, I think, who wrote that. Thank you for the comment, by the way. Thank you for your kind words. I like to mix things up a little bit. I wrote the October list. That's a book that goes backwards. We open Sunday night at 9 o'clock, and each successive chapter is 2 hours earlier until we come to Friday morning. And I just try to look for things that will, shake up readers' expectations a bit and still, tell a coherent story. And I went through that. I reread the book, Never Again, many, many times, and decided it was not distracting, and that it would require a bit of a commitment on the reader's part, but not an excessive commitment. Last thing I would ever want to have happen is those readers, remember gods, I was mentioning that, close the book and say, no, it's not for me. So thank you for that. But I gather you're a writer as well, and I would say, yeah, stick to your guns if you like that. And I will say, Doug, reading your comment there, actually, I timed it very carefully. there's one flashback, well, flash forward scene, and then in the middle of the book, not 3/4 of the way through, there's the second segment of that, and then at the end, we pick it up in real time. So it was coordinated pretty carefully, and you never know if you get everything right, but I tried to work with that. But if you like that concept, yeah, go with it, definitely.
I'm going to, speaking of time, we're going to just go 5 minutes more. Jeff, if I can keep you for 5 minutes past our
Yeah, sure,
time,
sure.
plot twist, we'll just go a few minutes extra. And I'm going to kind of combine a few of these questions about whether you work on more than one book at a time and what that looks like. And relatedly, perhaps relatedly, when you're plotting a novel that you plan to be a series, how much of the entire series do you plot before writing book one? So those, I know they're not the same question, but I feel like they're related.
Sure. The question on the arc of a series, I'll get to that one. Get to that one first because I happen to be working on the second book in the series. Well, the sixth book in the Coulter Shaw series, and the second book in the Sanchez and Heron series that Isabella and I are writing. In the Coulter Shaw, that had an arc of a 3-book arc because I had to. If you've seen the Tracker TV show, his father's death is a subplot. I had to deal with that intentionally in three novels. Once that arc was completed, no more arc. The standalone, the Coulter Shaws are all standalone. Uh, the um, the books that I'm writing with Isabella, there is not so much an arc, but there's a springboard from one to the next. So we don't have an overarching arc for that series, and I tend not to do that. For one thing, I don't really want to get locked in, but I had to deal with Coulter Shaw's father because he's got a fascinating family and the survivalism and everything. And I'm sorry, what was the first question of the two?
They were about if you're working on more than one, do you work on more than
Oh
one
yeah,
book? And
yeah. Well,
so
that like 10, 12 hours a day. I'd go crazy if I had to work on one thing at a time. What I tend to do is outline one book, write the prose of a second book, because it would be hard to, outline 2 books at the same time and then write the prose because I jump back and forth. And the styles are a bit different. I'm third person, always writing third person close point of view. But, those the tones of the books are different. Lincoln Rhymes is kind of an austere forensic scientist. Coulter Shaw's a guy who rock climbs and does motocross, and he's kind of a cowboy sort. So the tones, the word choice are different. So I couldn't combine those two. But then so outline and prose I can do at the same time, 2 different books. And then the short stories I can just do those. They come very quickly to me. I'm very lucky. That's spend a weekend. So I take time off, do a weekend, write a short story, and then I'm back to the others.
this question also is a little bit about timing, just to kind of go back to like flash forward. It's about that you mentioned the action taking place over a short period of time. And again, we'll be sharing those rules with a handout and a link to the video after tonight. Action taking place over a short period of time. What would your opinion be on those that don't? For example, an inciting incident that takes place in one decade that has consequences in the next. Is there a way to integrate that?
Absolutely fine. As long as the past incident has dramatic development, and as long as the present incident has dramatic development. My book, Garden of Beasts, takes place in 1936. It's about an American hitman's attempt to assassinate one of Hitler's aides. Well, it opens in New York, in Manhattan, in I forget what month in 1936, and he's under the auspices of the Olympics. He's got to get from Manhattan to Berlin. Well, he's not taking an airplane. He's with the Olympic team on the SS Manhattan, the USS Manhattan, the ocean liner. But I just didn't write about anything on the ocean liner. It was like chapter 2. Miraculously, he arrived, and it wasn't miraculous, but he arrived in Berlin, and the action took off from there. And in flashbacks, just make sure they have that dramatic development. Make put a question in the mind of the reader every time you sit down to write. Now, let me just say this. I'm talking about the kind of book I write. There are people who do not like the kind of book I write. They want a slower paced, character-driven study that is, rich with heritage, rich with culture. Those are absolutely fine. It's just not the kind of book I myself read. And so you should always write, don't, get the idea that, oh, zombies in this English boarding school, Hogwarts, I'm going to write that up and make a ton of money. If you don't read, The Walking Dead or watch Walking Dead and read Harry Potter, don't do it. Write the kind of book that you enjoy. And that's basically what I've settled on.
Well, we'll close with this question, but I'll just say, for all the countries in the world and all the Beacon International number one bestseller, I think there's a whole lot of readers that enjoy the book that you write, that you enjoy writing, the books that you enjoy writing.
You're very
So
kind.
we'll close with this question, and then actually, I'm just going to first say I've put a link to MWA-U's website in the bottom. Just a reminder, you can also find everything about Jeffrey's books at his website. But our final session will be Wednesday, November 5th, which is the Wednesday after a very consequential day, with Sherry Lewis Wool discussing forensics, including how to select the right dog, literally how to select the right dog, and what training at body farms looks like. I've included that link in the chat to register, and we'll hope to see you on November 6th. And if you're not an MWA member, please reminder to check out all membership has to offer. And I also just wanted to say, I'm not sure if anyone is joining us from Florida tonight, but that we're thinking of those who are perhaps literally in the path of the storm, and many bookstores that are. So to be, supporting in whatever ways you can there, and in Asheville and other places. So I wanted to close with this question to say, it's an anonymous question, so I don't know who we're congratulating, but they share that they just sold their first thriller in a 2-book deal. So hooray.
Congratulations.
Any advice on writing the second book and building the career? And I remember one of the rules, which is don't kill your main character. So maybe that might be one to start with, but what would you say about writing that second book and building a career?
Yeah. I would say simply that if I understand correctly, the book is sold, is that correct?
Yes, so it sounds like he's so any gender of the writer just sold their first thriller in a 2-book deal. So I'm not sure if it's if the idea is that's going to be a series or if it's just 2 books. But either way, what's it look like to build a career?
I'll give you the advice that I have followed, and it harkens back to an old adage that is kind of a joke, but I'll explain it in a minute, from Hollywood, and that is that when a producer is looking for a they don't call our things books and stories, they call them product. When they're looking for product to turn into a movie, they want they're looking for 2 things. One, something that has been wildly successful in the past, and 2, that has never ever been done before. And so we laugh at that, the contradiction. Wildly successful in the past and yet never been done is completely unique, but there's truth to that. So let me give you an example from my own writing. What people like about Lincoln Rhyme, for instance, is he's a brilliant Sherlock Holmesian character. I'm going to do that over and over and over again. He's always going to be a brilliant, actually, and a curmudgeonly Sherlock Holmes kind of character. That's what's been wildly successful in the past. And a book that moves very quickly and so forth. That's my template. But what's never been done before? Well, what's never been done before was The Broken Window about data mining, The Burning Wire about the electric grid, the Empty Chair about the dangers of pesticides, about the Coffin Dancer, about the dangers of that are presented in the aviation industry. So my advice would be keep to your template, write the same sort of book, but give it a new hook. And if you've gone after a serial killer in the first one, and you want to stick to serial killers, fine. Just make it a different serial killer, very unique serial killer, so that the reviewers and your editor will be able to say, oh, wow, it's got that exciting thing we liked, and yet there's something new about it. There's some new hook.
Thank you so much for that. Jeff, your mind is the most fascinating place to live. So
Some would say terrifying, Katie, but that's all
or
right. So,
yes, we could use many different adjectives, but we're so
thank you.
grateful for your expertise and for sharing everything this evening. And thank you all for being here tonight. The registration for the last MWA-U session will open on Monday. And again, we'll share a handout from this evening or whatever time you may be listening to this with a link to the video to see it. So thank you, everyone.
Well,
Appreciate you being here. And thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Katie, for the wonderful moderation. And thank you, everybody. Take care now. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Good night.